Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the headlines. A highly complex search and rescue operation is underway after an American Airlines passenger plane crashed with a military helicopter in Washington, D.C. Both vehicles went into the Potomac River just before 9 p.m, with many, if not all, of the passengers and crew feared dead. So far, 19 bodies have been recovered. 3 Israeli hostages are being released by Hamas today. Agam Berger has already been handed to Red Cross officials and entered Israel, with Arbel, Yehoud and Gadi to be freed shortly. Israel has also confirmed that 5 unnamed Thai hostages will be released, with 110 Palestinian prisoners expected to be freed in exchange. Ahmed al-Sharaa has been named as Syria's president for the transitional period before elections are held in the country. Sharaa, who led the rebel uprising against Bashar al-Assad, is the former leader of HTS, who were part of al-Qaeda until 2016. US President Donald Trump has ordered the construction of a migrant detention centre in Guantanamo Bay. He says the facility at the US naval base in Cuba will hold as many as 30,000 people. Israel and Hamas are completing another hostage swap as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Agam Berger, who has already been handed to Red Cross officials, is one of 3 Israeli hostages to be released today. Arbel, Yehoud and Gadi are being freed, along with 5 Thai nationals. Meanwhile, Israel is expected to release 110 Palestinian prisoners, including 32 serving life sentences. Yehoud was originally set for release last week, but a dispute delayed her freedom. The ceasefire brokered by Qatar, Egypt and the US has held despite tensions. Meanwhile, freed hostage Ahmed Susanna revealed that another captive, Liri Albag, saved her life by talking a Hamas militant out of killing her. With more hostage releases expected, the fate of those still in captivity remains uncertain. Joining us to discuss this story, first of all, we have our correspondent Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, I really want to get an understanding of the significance of the hostages who are being released today and the impact that it will have on the ceasefire deal.
Josh, these hostages that are being released by both the sides are part of the ceasefire deal, that has been agreed between the Israeli side and as well as the Hamas. So far, on the both sides, if we talk about this ceasefire deal, there have been disagreements on both the sides while receiving the releasing the hostages. Yesterday only we saw that Israel said that 8 hostages, some of the hostages who were in Hamas captivity have died in the captivity itself, and now the very next day 3 Israeli hostages are being released by Hamas. So it is a complex process. At the same time, both the sides are still holding negotiations so that all the phases of this all these hostages release phases of the hostages release can be successfully completed as agreed by both the parties. As far as the hostages are to be released. So it needs to be seen by when would all the Israeli hostages and as well as the Palestinian prisoners that are in custody of Israel will be released by both the sides, because since Donald Trump has taken over as the president, this process of releasing the hostages from on both the sides has speeden up quite significantly. So this needs to be seen, George, by when would the entire process be completed, and this will pave the way for peace on both the sides, and the refugee camps and the normal lifestyles of people on both the sides, be it in Gaza or in Israel, can once again begin. Yes, George, back to you in the studios.
Also joining us to discuss the latest development coming out of the Middle East is Lev Aran, who's a former coordinator of Israel-India Parliamentary Friendship League. He's joining us from Israel. Leveran, thank you for your time. There have been celebrations in Tel Aviv and across Israel with the news that these hostages are going to be freed, but in return 110 Palestinian prisoners, 32 of them serving a life sentence. What's the feeling in Israel relating to that?
Of course, mixed feelings, because on one hand you have hostages, they did nothing wrong to anybody, they were abducted from their homes. On the other hand, you have murderers, and some of them are very proud of being murderers. So the feelings are mixed, but still it is more tilted to happiness that at last we see hostages that are coming back to Israel, and also happiness that as far as most Israelis are concerned, they see Donald Trump as a very important tool to force both Israel and Hamas continue negotiations also to the next step. Because this step, as nightmarish as it is still the easier one, because it is only a humanitarian stage. If Hamas have a citizen, they will get 30 prisoners and 50 for a soldier. But next step is the political step. It is much more complicated.
Yes, Leveran, talking about that next step, is there a fear that some of these people being released might come back to haunt Israel, whether that's through an attack with Hamas or causing further issues across the border?
This is a question to me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Look, the reason why it is so complicated is because both Israel and Hamas, they are not the only players. You have Qatar, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Egypt, and now Donald Trump spoke about some Palestinians who will immigrate to Jordan. So it is so complex, and we have a government in Israel that cannot really take unpopular decisions. And if Hamas will become again the ruler of Gaza, not even de jure, even de facto, it will be a huge blow to Netanyahu. So the next step is very, very complicated, and we are all banking on Donald Trump to force both sides to have some kind of agreement, and then we will have a long ceasefire.
Also joining us is Gautam Mukherjee, a senior journalist. Gautam Mukherjee, thank you for your time. It seems today that the hostage release and incoming exchange is going to plan. Can this provide any security and any sort of positive feeling about further hostage releases and then moving forward, potentially a deal after the 3 phases are completed as part of this deal?
Well, I think the hostage release is going reasonably smoothly. Knowing the names, the Hamas keeps changing the names of the people who are to be released. However, they are releasing them at a steady rate as agreed, and vice versa. The Palestinians who are being released are being sent back. So this part of it is going rather well. However, I agree with our Israeli friend here that the political side of it requires Hamas no longer to be running the administration of Gaza, and whoever substitutes them should not have any military ambitions, because otherwise you just change the label and the situation doesn't get any better. The key thing, as I've said before on your program, is to prevent or negotiate a settlement with Iran so that they stop supplying money, arms, equipment, ammunition, training to the Gaza people, who then either become Hamas or they become a militant of another name, and the situation doesn't improve. Trump's idea of moving a lot of people to Egypt and Jordan is audacious as usual. Whether Egypt has tried this in the past, long ago, and it caused them a lot of grief, because when you bring in a lot of radicals, your own country is disturbed. And the same applies to Jordan, whose first reaction has been, I've already got millions of Palestinians, I don't need more. So where do these people go? If they have to stay there, you really have to work on the back end. It's not so much the front end. These people are radicalized by professional people who come in and radicalize them and the entire support structure, including women and children. So it's the back end that needs to be negotiated and neutralized.
Both Gautam Mukherjee and Lev Aron are going to stay with us as we stay in the Middle East, as Syria has entered a new political era as Ahmed al-Sharaa is named president for the transitional period following the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad. Rebel commander Hassan Abdul Ghani announced the cancellation of Syria's 2012 constitution and the dissolution of the former regime's parliament, army and security agencies. Sharaa vowed to restore stability by forming an interim legislative council and integrating former rebel groups into state institutions. Meanwhile, Syria has urged Russia to pay war reparations for its role in the conflict as Moscow begins withdrawing troops from its key military bases. Before we go back to our guests, we are again joined by Aditya Wadwan, our correspondent. Aditya, how long could it be that Sharaa remains in interim power? We know he's already spoken, of course, about how long elections may take.
Well, Josh, if you see, this was bound to happen because since the HT Hayat Tahrir al-Sham had taken over the affairs in Syria with the rebel groups, he was only overlooking the overall political transition in Syria. So this was expected that Ahmed al-Sharaa will be at some point of time. They had to declare him as an interim president. So as long as no new leader is duly elected and appointed as a president, he will Sharaa will continue as the interim president of the Syria. So far, in the frame, there is no any other probable candidate who can assume the role of president. But let us just put this into perspective at this hour. HTS is a designated terrorist group by the United States of America as well as its Western allies. So it needs to be seen as to how the Western world deals with Syria now, since Ahmed al-Sharaa has been declared as the interim president of Syria. Yes, Josh, back to you in the studio.
Of course, and al-Sharaa himself has mentioned that elections may take up to 4 years. Looking at an extended stay for Sharaa, Lev Aron, how do Israelis feel and how do you think the Israeli government feels about Sharaa being in power on the border?
Look, we do not really know well al-Sharaa. We know that he's like ex-jihadist, maybe still a jihadist. We know well al-Sharaa family. Farouk al-Sharaa was a vice president of Syria, and they both belong to the same jati, we can say. He will try to prove that he is not the jihadist that everybody are afraid of. Qatar will help him to say the right words, because this is what Qatar is doing all over the Middle East. They find the words that the West can digest while they are radicalizing the Middle East, and he will do the same. Now, if he changed his skin, it will take time to see. But as far as Israel is concerned, you will not see a strong Syrian army as long as there are no normalization between Syria and Israel. So on one hand, Iran lost its proxies in 4 countries. In Yemen, they lost a lot of them. In Iraq, in Syria, they lost it all. And in Lebanon, they lost a lot. But still, being a jihadist Sunni is as dangerous as being a jihadist Shia. Thank you.
Levaran, what do you think it would take for Israel to potentially want to use military force against the Syrian forces? Now, of course, they have become institutionalized within the government, but a lot of those rebel groups still exist.
Look, unlike the West Bank, who is actually almost inside Jerusalem and few kilometers from Tel Aviv, the Syrian border is quite far away from our big cities. So what Israel did, Israel reoccupied territories that were under Israeli occupation between 67 and 73. And also the peak of the pass of the Hermon mountain is also now under Israel. And I don't think Israel has the appetite to delve into the micro politics of Syria, because this will be nightmarish. We remember what happened when we tried it during the first Lebanese war between 82 and 85. We lost it. So I don't think we will get into the Syrian soup, but we will try to protect our borders. And if needed, you will see Israeli soldiers even further to the east of Syria.
Gautam Mukherjee, we of course can't ignore al-Sharaa's links and former links with al-Qaeda. There does seem, however, to be a move from Western countries looking to potentially get rid of sanctions that are in place. Do you think that there will be some countries that are sitting sort of on either side as this moves forward? And what do you think the Western response will be overall?
I think the West will try very hard to move on from the Assad days. You had too many players in Syria. You had Turkey, you had Russia, you had the Americans, you had other allies, NATO allies, you had Israel, and now, and all of it was a very disturbed area. Now, whether it is the Taliban in Afghanistan or the ISIS and their successors with new labels in Syria, it is quite important for both Syria, which is devastated by war of so many years, and practically no means of livelihood except the drugs that they were selling. Now that is being put a stop to by the new regime, at least ostensibly. So they need to revive their economy, give hope to the Syrian people, many of whom are trying to come back, get the foreigners out of the country, the Turks, very interested. The Russians are starting to leave. And as Mr. Aaron pointed out, I mean, Israel is not looking for a problem. It is only trying to defend itself. So as long as these people also decide to do something that is beneficial to Syria but not harmful to others, I think progress can be made. And I think an opportunity exists at this point in time, especially with a tough president in the United States, for actual progress to be made. I do think on the sidelines of this, the Ukraine war will come to an end, the Gaza war will come to an end because of Trump pressure. And as a consequence, the focus will be on Iran not to interfere, and possibly changes in the polity in Iran, maybe a regime change from the Ayatollahs. Now, all of this is, typically representative of a changing Middle East, West Asia area, but there is hope for a better time to come. There's the Abrahamic Accords in the background. There is greater understanding of Israel and the moderate Arabs. There's every chance that we could move ahead from here.
Gautam Mukherjee and Lev Aran, thank you very much for joining us. We now go back to our top story of the day, and a mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. between a passenger plane and an army helicopter has left multiple people dead. The impact split the plane in two. Here is what we know about the tragedy so far.
A devastating mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. sent a passenger plane carrying 64 people crashing into the icy Potomac River after striking an Army helicopter. So far, multiple bodies have been recovered as emergency teams search the freezing waters for survivors. The collision occurred in the night when PSA Airlines Flight 5432, operating as American Airlines, was approaching Reagan National Airport and collided with a U.S. Army UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. The impact split the plane in two, while the helicopter overturned in the river. Authorities are investigating as rescue crews search in freezing waters. Reagan Airport is closed until Friday, with flights diverted to Dulles. President Donald Trump called it a terrible accident, praising first responders. Many others have also commented on the tragedy.
You know, when one person dies, it's a tragedy, but when many people die, it's an unbearable sorrow. It's a heartbreak beyond measure.
This is a difficult day for all of us at American Airlines, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, partners, first responders, along with their families and loved ones.
Investigators are working to determine what led to this fatal night over Washington, D.C. Wichita will hold a citywide prayer vigil Thursday at noon for those affected by the tragic mid-air collision. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will, of course, continue to bring you the updates as we get them from Washington, D.C. But now we'll take a look at the latest news from across the world of business. US President Donald Trump has signed a legal settlement. This has seen Facebook and Instagram owner Meta pay roughly $25 million. Trump sued the social media giant and its chief executive Mark Zuckerberg back in 2021. In July 2024, Meta lifted the final restrictions on Trump's Facebook and Instagram accounts. This occurred in the lead up to the US presidential elections. Finland's Nokia has reported a stronger than expected 38% rise in fourth quarter adjusted operating profits. This rise was driven by higher sales of telecom equipment to mobile operators in North America and India. The company has forecast an upbeat 2025. However, net sales have risen 10% to €5.98 billion, beating estimates of €5.74 billion. US economic growth has likely slowed in the fourth quarter. This slowdown is due to a surge in imports. Also, a strike at Boeing has hurt spending on aircraft. However, strong domestic demand will probably keep the Federal Reserve on a shallow interest rate cut path. Microsoft shares have fallen in Europe. This drop came after the company issued a downbeat forecast for its cloud business. Meanwhile, Facebook parent Meta shares have risen after beating expectations. However, investors have been scrutinising the company's spending on artificial intelligence. Swedish fast fashion retailer H&M reported weaker than expected fourth quarter sales. This was partly due to a late Black Friday. However, the company has stated that sales were up 4% in December and January. This indicates a better start to the new fiscal year. China's launch of its ChatGPT alternative DeepSeek has sent ripples through the business and tech worlds. However, due to its growing popularity, the platform has been targeted by a major cyber attack. Here's a full report on the recent developments.
Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek is gaining attention in Silicon Valley for matching Western competitors' capabilities at a lower cost, with its headquarters in Hangzhou. DeepSeek's hedge fund manager, Liang Wenfeng, developed the R1 model, ranking high on the Apple Store and matching US competitors at a fraction of the development cost. DeepSeek, a Chinese startup, developed its LLMS DeepSeek v3 R1 to compete with ChatGPT models while offering cheaper API connections. President Trump issued a statement on this. Let's hear his words.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
DeepSeek's impact caused a significant drop on Wall Street, with major tech stocks, including NVIDIA, dropping nearly 17% to close at $118.58. Elon Musk questions DeepSeek's AI chatbot claims, particularly regarding the reported GPU count. OpenAI's Sam Altman finds DeepSeek's rise exciting and hints at potential new releases from OpenAI to compete with DeepSeek's R1 model. DeepSeek announced a temporary registration limit due to a cyber attack after its AI assistant's sudden popularity. Social media is buzzing about DeepSeek's success, calling it China's Sputnik moment in AI, with debates about the future of the AI race. Bureau Report, NewsX.
That is all for now, but we'll be back very shortly with more of your news from across the world.